The space station called Concordia Prime was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy. It floated in neutral space, far from any empire or territory. For 900 years, it had served as the symbol of peace between all species. Today, it was decorated with lights and banners from 1,000 different worlds. Today was the anniversary of the Pax Galactica, the great peace treaty that had ended all major wars. General Amara Chen stood at the window of her private quarters, looking out at the stars. She was 63 years old, but she still stood straight and strong. Her black hair had turned gray at the temples, and lines had formed around her dark eyes. Those eyes had seen much in her lifetime. They had seen battlefields and peace talks, funerals and celebrations. Today, they would see history. She was Earth's representative to this great gathering. More than that, she was the most respected human in the galaxy. Other species called her the Peacekeeper, because she had personally stopped 17 different conflicts through careful words and patient negotiation. She believed in peace with all her heart. She had dedicated her life to it. A soft knock came at her door. "Mother," said a voice from outside, "it's time." Amara smiled and opened the door. Her son James stood there in his admiral's uniform. He was tall like his father had been, with the same serious expression. But he had her eyes, dark and thoughtful. "You look nervous," Amara said. "You're about to speak to 10,000 worlds," James replied. "Someone should be nervous." Amara laughed softly. "I've done this before." "Not like this. 900 years, Mother. The whole galaxy is watching." She touched his face gently. "Then we should give them something worth watching." They walked together through the great halls of Concordia Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6 or none at all. Some breathed oxygen, others carried their own atmosphere in special suits. All of them nodded respectfully as General Chen passed. The main assembly hall was enormous. It could hold 50,000 beings, and today every seat was filled. Floating cameras broadcast the event to every corner of the galaxy. Trillions of beings on countless worlds were watching. At the front of the hall sat the representatives of the 5 great powers. The Krethali, with their 4 arms and scaled skin. The Vorn Collective, who shared one mind across millions of bodies. The Silurian Federation, graceful and tall, with silver skin. The Morthak Dominion, massive and strong like living mountains. And the Zerathians, the oldest and most powerful empire in the galaxy. The Zerathian delegation sat in the center, as befitting their status. High Archon Velketh led them, dressed in robes of deep purple and gold. His species looked almost human, but taller and thinner, with pale blue skin and eyes that held no warmth. The Zerathians had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, before humans ever left their home planet. They considered themselves the natural leaders of all civilized species. Amara took her place at the speaking platform. She looked out at the vast crowd and felt the weight of the moment. 900 years of peace. Her species had come so far. "Friends," she began, her voice carried to every corner of the hall by hidden speakers. "We gather today to celebrate something precious, something rare. We celebrate peace." She spoke of the history they all shared. She spoke of the wars that had come before, the suffering and death that had touched every species. She spoke of the wisdom of those who had signed the original treaty, who had chosen cooperation over conflict. "For 900 years, we have proven that different species can live together," Amara continued. "We have traded knowledge and resources. We have built wonders that no single species could have created alone. We have become more than we were." High Archon Velketh watched her with cold eyes. He remembered a different history. He remembered when humans were nothing, just primitive creatures on a small planet, still fighting among themselves with chemical weapons and simple machines. The Zerathians had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. And now look at them. In just 900 years, humans had risen from nothing to become one of the most influential species in the galaxy. They sat at every important table. They led scientific projects and diplomatic missions. Their culture spread everywhere. Their population grew and grew. Velketh had warned his council many times. The humans were dangerous, not because they were strong, but because they grew so fast. Give them another 1,000 years, and they would dominate everything. The old powers would become relics of the past. His advisors had agreed. Something had to be done. Something to remind the galaxy of the natural order. Something to put humanity back in its proper place. Today was that day. Amara was still speaking when Velketh gave the signal. A small gesture, barely noticeable. But his guards had been waiting for it. One of them raised a weapon, a small device, easily hidden in formal robes. It made no sound when it fired. The energy beam struck General Chen in the chest. For a moment, everything stopped. Amara looked down at the wound in her chest with an expression of pure surprise. Blood began to spread across her white formal uniform. She looked up at the crowd, at her son rushing toward the platform, at the camera still broadcasting to trillions of watching beings. "Remember," she said, her voice barely a whisper now. "Remember what we are." Then she fell. The hall exploded into chaos. Screams filled the air. Delegates ran in all directions. Security forces rushed toward the Zerathian section, but Velketh's guards formed a protective circle around their master. Admiral James Chen reached his mother's body. He dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Medical teams were pushing through the crowd, but he could see in her pale face that it might be too late. "Hold on," he whispered. "Please hold on." High Archon Velketh stood calmly amid the chaos. He had expected more resistance, perhaps violence from the humans. Instead, he saw only grief and confusion, as he had always believed. "This woman was a threat to galactic security," Velketh announced, his voice booming over the noise. "Evidence has been found connecting her to terrorist organizations. The Zerathian Empire has acted to protect all civilized species." It was a lie, of course. Everyone knew it was a lie, but lies backed by power often become truth. The Zerathian delegation transported away, disappearing in flashes of light before anyone could stop them. They returned to their warships, which had been waiting nearby. Within minutes, they were gone, jumping into hyperspace toward their own territory. Admiral Chen watched them go. His mother had been taken by the medical teams, rushed into emergency surgery. He did not know if she would survive. He did not know anything except the cold feeling spreading through his chest. Around him, the other delegations were in chaos. Some demanded immediate action against the Zerathians. Others called for calm, for investigation, for patience. The Krethali ambassador was shouting that this meant war. The foreign collective had gone completely silent, all their bodies standing still as they processed the event across their shared mind. James Chen stood slowly. He walked through the chaos without seeing it. His feet carried him back to his ship, the UES Vengeance, docked at the station's military section. His crew saw his face and knew that something terrible had happened. In his private quarters, James sat in darkness for a long time. He thought about his mother. He thought about everything she had built, everything she believed in. He thought about the Zerathians and their ancient arrogance. Then he opened a communication channel. His face appeared on screens across the human fleet, on every military installation, on every ship and station that flew under Earth's flag. "This is Admiral Chen," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. By now you have seen what happened. My mother, General Amara Chen, has been shot by Zyrathian forces during the peace celebration. Her condition is unknown. He paused, letting the words sink in across the stars. 900 years ago, we signed a treaty with the galaxy. We promised to keep the peace. We kept that promise. For 900 years, we kept that promise. His eyes were dark pools of something dangerous, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Signal all fleets. Condition Omega. The old ones have forgotten why we signed that treaty in the first place. He closed the channel. Across human space, on 100 different worlds, alarms began to sound. Ships that had sat quiet for decades suddenly came to life. Soldiers who had never seen real combat received orders they had trained for all their lives. The Zyrathians had fired the first shot. They expected humanity to crumble, to beg for mercy, to accept their proper place as a lesser species. They had made a terrible mistake. The peace that had held for 900 years was over, and the galaxy was about to remember why it had needed that peace in the first place. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every inhabited world knew what had happened on Concordia Prime. The broadcast showed it again and again. General Chen speaking of peace, the flash of the weapon, her body falling, her final words. Remember what we are. On the Zyrathian homeworld, High Archon Velketh addressed his people with confidence. He told them that humanity had grown too bold, too ambitious. He told them that the humans had been planning to break the treaty themselves, and that the Zyrathians had simply acted first. He told them that the other great powers would support them, or at least stay neutral. The humans are young and weak, Velketh said. They have grown comfortable in peace. They have forgotten how to fight. When they see our strength, they will submit. They always do. His advisors nodded in agreement. The Zyrathian Empire had 50 times more warships than humanity. Their technology was ancient and proven. Their soldiers had conquered 100 species before humans had even discovered fire. But not everyone in the galaxy shared this confidence. On the Krethali homeworld, Ambassador Varmoth sat in his private chambers, surrounded by ancient books and records. His 4 hands trembled as he read documents that had been sealed for 9 centuries. Documents that told a very different story than the one most beings knew. The official history said that the Pax Galactica had been a gift from the elder races to the younger ones. A chance for primitive species like humanity to join galactic civilization peacefully. The official history said that humans had been grateful, humble, eager to learn. The official history was a lie. Varmoth had been a young diplomat when the treaty was signed. Now, reading these old records, he remembered it clearly. 900 years ago, humanity had not been alone on Earth. The Krethali had found them first. A primitive species, just beginning to explore their own star system. Easy prey, the Krethali had thought. A useful labor force, a species to be conquered and controlled. They had been so wrong. The Krethali invasion of Earth had lasted 3 days. By the end, half of the Krethali fleet was destroyed. The humans had used weapons no one had expected. Nuclear devices, chemical agents, biological weapons. They had turned their own planet into a trap. They had fought with a ferocity that shocked the galaxy. But that was only the beginning. The Krethali had called for help. 11 other species had joined the war against humanity. The Vorn Collective, the Silurians, the Morthak, even the Zyrathians themselves. 12 species united against one primitive world. It should have been easy. It was anything but. The humans learned fast. Every weapon used against them was studied, copied, improved. Every tactic was analyzed and countered. They captured enemy ships and figured out how they worked. They took alien technology and made it their own. Within 5 years, humanity was not defending Earth anymore. They were attacking. Their ships appeared in systems light years from their home. They struck supply lines and military bases. They freed other species that had been enslaved by the 12 powers. The war lasted 20 years. By the end, the great powers were not fighting to conquer humanity. They were fighting to survive. Varmoth remembered the final battle. The human fleet had surrounded the Krethali homeworld. Their ships darkened the sky. Their weapons could have burned the planet to ash, but they didn't. A human general had broadcast a message to the whole planet. We never wanted this war. You brought it to us. Now we offer you a choice. Peace or extinction. You have 1 hour to decide. The Krethali had chosen peace. So had the other 11 species. The Pax Galactica had been born not from the mercy of the elder races, but from the mercy of humanity. Varmoth closed the old records and stood slowly. He walked to his communication center and prepared a message. Not to his own government, but to the Zyrathians directly. High Archon Velkath, he said, his voice heavy with 9 centuries of hidden shame. You fools, you absolute fools, you have killed the only one who was holding them back. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy, as the Old Ones remembered. On the Vorn Collective's central world, millions of bodies suddenly went still, as the shared mind accessed its oldest memories. Memories of human soldiers who kept fighting, even when their bodies were destroyed. Memories of human scientists who cracked Vorn communication codes that had been unbreakable for millennia. Memories of human compassion, too, of prisoners released and wounded enemies healed. The collective remembered the fear, the terrible fear of facing a species that seemed to have no limits. On the Morthak homeworld, ancient warriors gathered in their great halls and spoke of battles their grandparents had fought. The Morthak were the largest and strongest species in the galaxy. They had never feared anyone, but their elders had told stories of humans that made even Morthak children shiver. They do not stop, the old warriors had said. You can break their bodies, but you cannot break their will. They fight until they win or until they are dead. And even then, their children remember. Their children come back. The Silurians, who prided themselves on being the most advanced and civilized species, their ancestors had tried to study humans, to understand what made them so dangerous. The conclusion had been terrifying. Humans were dangerous because they could be anything. They could be kind and cruel, patient and explosive, rational and passionate. They adapted to any situation. They used every tool available. They never, ever gave up. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived their whole lives in peace suddenly felt an old fear waking up. Their parents had told them stories. Their grandparents had shown them scars. The galaxy had spent 9 centuries trying to forget what humanity was capable of. Now they were remembering. And then something strange happened. Human space went dark. It started with the border worlds. Communication stations stopped transmitting. Trade ships turned back without explanation. Military vessels withdrew to unknown locations. Within 2 days, no signal came out of human territory. No ship entered or left. The Zyrathians laughed when they heard this. They are hiding, Velkath announced to his council. They know they cannot defeat us, so they hide like frightened animals. Soon they will send diplomats to beg for mercy. But the older races did not laugh. The Krethali ambassador sent a private message to his government. They are not hiding. They are preparing. I have seen this before. We all have. The humans go quiet before they strike. They gather their strength. They make their plans. And when they come... He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. On Concordia Prime, the other delegations gathered to discuss what should be done. Some argued that they should support the Zyrathians. The humans were young and dangerous, they said. Perhaps it was better to control them now, before they grew too powerful. Others argued for neutrality. This was a conflict between humans and Zarathians. Why should other species get involved? But the Kreth Ali ambassador spoke against both positions. He stood before the assembly with the weight of history on his shoulders. I was there, he said. 900 years ago, I was there when we signed the treaty. We did not sign it because we were merciful. We signed it because we were terrified. We begged the humans to stop. We promised them anything they wanted if they would just stop. He looked around at the gathered delegates. General Chen was not just a diplomat. She was a symbol. She represented everything humanity had chosen to become instead of what they could have been. She was their promise to us that they would keep the peace. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And you shot her. He turned to the Silurian delegation. Your grandparents burned human cities. The humans forgave you. He turned to the Morphak. Your ancestors enslaved human colonies. The humans freed themselves and still offered you peace. He turned to look at the empty Zarathian seats. And now you have shot the woman who spent her whole life keeping the humans gentle. You have reminded them of every crime we committed against them. You have awakened something that should have stayed sleeping forever. The assembly was silent. What will they do? Someone asked. Varmoth closed his eyes. They will come, and they will teach us again why we should never have forgotten. Deep in human space, in shipyards hidden from galactic eyes, ancient machines came to life. Weapons that had been sealed for centuries were unsealed. Soldiers received orders that had been waiting for generations. The humans were not hiding. They were waking up, deep beneath the surface of Mars, in tunnels that no alien eye had ever seen. Lights flickered to life for the first time in centuries. Machines that had sat silent since before anyone could remember began to hum with power. Dust fell from metal surfaces as ancient systems checked themselves and found everything in order. Commander Sarah Park walked through these tunnels with a feeling of awe in her chest. She had known about this place her whole life. Every human soldier knew about it. But knowing was different from seeing. How long has this been here? Asked Lieutenant Cole, walking beside her. Since before the treaty, Sarah replied. Our great-grandparents built it, and their great-grandparents maintained it. Every generation added something new. They entered a massive chamber, larger than any building on the surface. Row after row of warships hung in silent readiness. Ships that looked nothing like the peaceful trading vessels the galaxy knew. These were warships, true warships, built with one purpose in mind. The Zarathians think we have 3,000 ships, Sarah said. They think they outnumber us 50 to 1. She looked at the endless rows of vessels. They can't count. Similar scenes played out across human space. On Earth, vaults that had been sealed by the original treaty signers were finally opened. The seals had been checked every year, maintained by a special order whose only job was to keep these things ready. Ready for a day that everyone hoped would never come. Admiral James Chen stood in one of these vaults, looking at weapons that made his modern equipment seem like toys. Devices that could tear holes in space itself. Shields that learned from every attack. Ships that moved faster than physics should allow. 900 years, he said quietly. For 900 years, we hoped we would never need these. His chief scientist, Dr. Emily Vance, stood beside him. Your ancestors were wise, Admiral. They knew that peace was fragile. They knew that someday someone would forget. So they prepared. Every generation prepared. Your mother knew about all of this. She worked her whole life to make sure we would never need it. Emily paused. But she also made sure it would be ready if we did. James nodded slowly. He had received word an hour ago. His mother was alive. The doctors had saved her, barely. She was in a deep sleep, her body healing, but she would survive. When she woke up, He wanted to be able to tell her that the threat was ended, that she could go back to building peace. Across the planet, the people of Earth went about their preparations with calm efficiency. There was no panic, no chaos. Every family knew what to do. Every child had been taught since birth. The treaty said that humans should disarm, should become peaceful, should forget how to fight. They had simply chosen not to fight. There was a difference. Old soldiers came out of retirement. Men and women who had served in peacekeeping forces, who had trained for war but never seen it. They put on uniforms they had kept clean and ready for decades. They reported to stations they had memorized but never visited. Young people joined them. Boys and girls who had grown up on stories of the First Contact War, who had played games about defending Earth, who had always known, somewhere deep inside, that this day might come. In schools across human space, teachers paused their lessons to explain what was happening. The peace has been broken, they told their students. But remember what we learned. Remember that we fight only when we must. Remember that even our enemies are living beings. The students listened. They understood. They had always understood. This was what it meant to be human. To hope for peace, but to prepare for war. To be kind when possible, but dangerous when necessary. On the colony world of New Singapore, Governor Marcus Webb addressed his people. The Zarathians think they know what humans are, he said. They remember the frightened newcomers we used to be. They don't know what we became. He held up his hand, showing an old scar that ran across his palm. My grandfather gave me this scar. He told me it was to remind me, to always remember what our people went through, to never let ourselves become weak. His voice grew stronger. We are not weak. We have never been weak. We simply chose to be gentle. That choice has been taken from us. Now the galaxy will see what we truly are. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Chen boarded his flagship, the UES Vengeance. It was a new ship, built in the last decade, the pride of the human fleet. But it would not fight alone. Around it, rising from hidden bases on the moon, from secret stations in the asteroid belt, from places the galaxy had never suspected, came the other ships, the old ships, vessels that had been built in the dark years after the First Contact War, maintained in secret, improved with each passing generation. The Zarathians had 50,000 warships. They thought humans had 3,000. The human fleet numbered 30,000, and every single one was more advanced than anything the Zarathians had ever seen. James Chen looked at the tactical display in his command center. His officers moved with quiet precision, preparing for what was to come. There was no excitement, no bloodlust, only determination. Admiral, said his communications officer, the other great powers are requesting contact. They want to know our intentions. Let them wait, James replied. They had their chance to stop this. They chose to do nothing. Sir, the Krethali ambassador is personally requesting a private channel. He says it's urgent. James considered for a moment, then nodded. The old Krethali's face appeared on his screen. Varmoth looked tired, sad, and afraid. Admiral Chen, Varmoth said, I must speak to you. Speak. I was there, 900 years ago. I saw what your people did. I saw what we did to you first. The ambassador's voice shook. I am sorry. I have been sorry my whole life. When the treaty was signed, I promised myself that I would spend the rest of my days making sure it was kept. James said nothing. The Zarathians acted without consulting the rest of us. Many of us tried to stop them. We failed. Varmoth leaned closer to the screen. But please, Admiral, please remember what your mother taught. Remember that revenge is not justice. Remember that the innocent should not suffer for the crimes of the guilty. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. Ambassador, do you know what my mother said to me before she left for Concordia Prime? No. She said that peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the choice to resolve conflicts without violence. She said that we must always offer that choice first, even to our enemies. Hope flickered in Varmot's eyes. The Zarathians will have their choice, James continued. We will not attack their civilians. We will not bomb their cities. We will go to their leaders, and we will offer them the chance to surrender, to face justice, to make this right. He leaned forward, and his eyes were hard. But if they refuse, Ambassador, then we will remove them from power ourselves, and nothing in this galaxy will stop us. The communication ended. Admiral Chen turned to his officers. Signal all fleets. We move in 6 hours. What about the other powers, sir? His executive officer asked. Will they interfere? They remember, Jane said. They remember what we can do. They will not interfere. He was right. Across the galaxy, the other great powers watched the human fleet assemble. They received reports of ships beyond counting, of weapons beyond understanding, of technology that should have been impossible. The Vorn Collective calculated the odds of victory against the human fleet. The calculation took only seconds. The result was absolute. Defeat was certain. They would not interfere. The Morthak War Council debated briefly. Their greatest warriors had once fought humans. Their ancestors had told them never to do so again. They would not interfere. The Silurians, the Krethali, every species that remembered the First Contact War came to the same conclusion. This was between humanity and the Zarathians. No one else would get involved. On the human flagship, Admiral Chen stood before his assembled officers. Behind him, the stars of human space glittered peacefully. 900 years ago, he said, our ancestors taught the galaxy to fear us. Today, we remind them why they should never have stopped. He turned to face the void where the Zarathian Empire waited. All ships, jump to hyperspace. We go to war. 30,000 human warships vanished in flashes of light, leaving empty space behind them. The sleeping giant had awakened, and it was angry. High Archon, Velketh, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Majesty, and smiled with satisfaction. Before him, the might of the Zarathian Empire stretched across space in perfect formation. 50,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Behind him, the loyal border of the Empire waited to be defended. The humans approach, his tactical officer reported. Long-range sensors show approximately 30,000 vessels. Velketh's smile widened. 30,000. More than intelligence had suggested, but still outnumbered. And Zarathian ships were superior. Zarathian crews were experienced. Zarathian tactics were perfected over 10,000 years of warfare. They come to die, Velketh said. Let them come. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zarathian formation. For a moment, both sides simply faced each other across the void. Thousands of ships on each side, weapons charged, shields raised. Admiral Chen looked at the massive Zarathian fleet and felt nothing. No fear, no doubt, no hesitation. Only a cold determination to finish what the Zarathians had started. Open a channel, he ordered. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. His communications officer nodded. Channel open, sir. Zarathian Fleet, this is Admiral James Chen of the United Earth Navy. Your leaders have committed an act of war against humanity by attacking General Amara Chen during a peace celebration. We demand the immediate surrender of High Archon Velketh and all individuals responsible for this crime. You have 1 hour to comply. If you refuse, we will come through you to get them. Velketh heard this message and laughed. He actually laughed out loud on his bridge, and his officers laughed with him. The arrogance, Velketh said. The absolute arrogance of these creatures. They are outnumbered, outgunned, and they dare to demand surrender? He opened his own channel. Human fleet, this is High Archon Velketh. Your species has forgotten its place in the galaxy. Today we will remind you. We will destroy your fleet. We will burn your worlds, and we will teach your children to kneel." He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. "All ships, attack formation. Destroy them all." 50,000 Zarathian warships began to move. Admiral Chen watched them come. His officers were tense, ready. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, but training was different from reality. Now they would see if they were truly prepared. "Admiral," his weapons officer said, "the enemy is in range of our primary weapons." "Wait." "Sir, wait. Let them get closer." The Zarathians closed the distance, their weapons charged with a sound that echoed across thousands of bridges. Their targeting systems locked onto human ships. Their commanders gave the order to fire. The first wave of Zarathian fire was massive. Thousands of energy beams and missiles crossed the void toward the human fleet. It should have been devastating. It should have destroyed dozens of ships. It hit nothing. Human ships moved in ways the Zarathians had never seen. They shifted through space like water flowing around rocks. Their engines bent physics in directions that Zarathian scientists would later say were impossible. Not a single shot found its target. Before the Zarathians could process this, the humans fired back. The first Zarathian ship to die was a battlecruiser called the Eternal Glory. One moment it was there, shields raised, weapons firing. The next moment it simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. It was there, and then it was gone. Then another ship vanished. And another. On the Imperial Majesty, Velket stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "What is happening? What are those weapons?" No one could answer him. No one had ever seen anything like this. The human fleet advanced into the Zarathian formation like a blade cutting through cloth. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, each one knowing exactly where to be at every moment. Their weapons struck with surgical precision, destroying military vessels while leaving supply ships and medical vessels untouched. Zarathian commanders tried to adapt. They changed formations, adjusted tactics, called for reinforcements. Nothing worked. Every strategy they tried, the humans seemed to have anticipated. Every trap they set, the humans avoided. Every strength they relied on, the humans turned into a weakness. "Fall back," Velketh finally ordered. "All ships fall back to secondary positions." But falling back was not so easy. Human ships appeared behind the Zarathian fleet, cutting off retreat. They appeared above and below, surrounding the Great Armada. The hunters had become the hunted. The battle lasted 6 hours. In the end, the Zarathian fleet was destroyed. Not captured, not scattered. Destroyed. 50,000 warships reduced to floating wreckage. Human losses, 147 ships. Across the galaxy, beings watched the battle unfold on their screens. They saw the most powerful military force in known history swept aside like dust before a storm. They saw human ships doing things that should have been impossible. They saw the absolute, terrifying efficiency of a species that had been preparing for this moment for 900 years. The Zarathian Empire was not conquered that day. The humans did not claim their territory or enslave their people. Instead, the human fleet moved deeper into Zarathian space, striking military targets with precision. Bases were destroyed. Defense platforms were neutralized. Government buildings were surrounded. But civilian areas were left untouched. On occupied Zarathian worlds, human soldiers landed. They did not massacre. They did not pillage. They set up information centers and broadcast a simple message in every language. "We are not here for your people. We are here for those who killed our mother. If you do not resist, you will not be harmed. If you know where the guilty ones are hiding, help us find them, and this will end faster." The Zarathians had expected monsters. They found soldiers who shared food with hungry civilians, medics who treated wounded enemies, officers who apologized for the inconvenience, and promised it would be over soon. It was more terrifying than any atrocity could have been. On the Krethali homeworld, Ambassador Varmoth watched the reports come in with tears in his eyes. They could destroy everything, he said to his aides. They could burn the Zerathians to ash, and no one could stop them. But they don't. They choose not to. Why? One of his aides asked, after what the Zerathians did. Because that is what makes them human, Varmoth replied. That is what has always made them human. They are not cruel by nature. They are not evil. They are simply limitless. In war and in peace, they choose what they want to be, and they have chosen mercy. He shook his head slowly. The Zerathians shot the wrong woman. They shot the symbol of human mercy, and now humanity is showing the galaxy that the mercy was not because of one woman. It is who they are. On Earth, in a hospital room surrounded by security and medical equipment, General Amara Chen opened her eyes for the first time since the shooting. Her body was weak. Her chest still hurt where the energy beam had torn through her. But she was alive. James, she whispered. Her son had left a message with the medical team. What did James do? A nurse explained gently. The war, the battle, the human fleet advancing through Zerathian space. Amara closed her eyes and cried. Not from gratitude, not from pride, from sorrow. So much death, she said. So much pain. I worked so hard. Ma'am, the nurse said, your son gave specific orders. No civilian targets. No unnecessary casualties. The military is being very careful. Amara nodded slowly. That sounds like James. He always listened. She lay there in her hospital bed, too weak to do anything but think. Think about the peace she had spent her life building. Think about the war that had shattered it. Think about what came next. Meanwhile, at the heart of the Zerathian Empire, High Archon Velketh hid in his palace. The mighty leader who had ordered the death of General Chen was now a hunted man. His fleet was destroyed. His government had collapsed. His own people were turning against him. A message within a message. High Archon Velketh, James said, his voice echoing in the great hall. By the authority of the United Earth Government, and in accordance with galactic law, I am placing you under arrest for crimes against peace, crimes against humanity, and attempted murder. You will face trial for your actions. Justice will be served. Velketh looked at the human standing before him, young, strong, with eyes that held both rage and control. The son of the woman he had shot. You could kill me, Velketh said. No one would stop you. No one would blame you. Yes, James agreed. I could. I have thought about it. Every day since you shot my mother, I have thought about putting my hands around your throat and watching you die. He stepped closer. But that is not who we are. That is not who she raised me to be. You will face justice, real justice, and the whole galaxy will watch. Guards came forward to take Velketh away. The war was over, but the harder work was just beginning. The trial of High Archon Velketh was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Trillions of beings watched as the once mighty rulers stood before a court made up of representatives from every major species. He wore simple gray clothes instead of his royal robes. His pale blue skin looked sickly under the bright lights. His eyes, once so cold and confident, were empty. Admiral James Chen stood in the gallery, watching. He had brought Velketh to justice. Now others would decide his fate. The evidence was presented clearly and completely. Communications showing that Velketh had planned the assassination. Testimony from his own advisors, who had turned against him. Records proving that there had been no threat from General Chen, that the security concern had been a complete lie. Velketh tried to defend himself. He spoke of the natural order, of the danger of letting younger species grow too powerful. He spoke of tradition and history, and the right of elder races to guide the galaxy. The court listened. Then they found him guilty of all charges. His sentence was not death. Humanity had specifically requested that he not be executed. Instead, he was sentenced to spend the rest of his long life on a prison planet, alone with his thoughts, watching the galaxy change in ways he had tried to prevent. Some thought this punishment was too gentle. Others understood that for someone like Velketh, being forgotten was worse than being killed. As the trial ended, attention turned to what would come next. The Pax Galactica was broken. The old order was shattered. Something new had to be built. 3 months after Velketh's conviction, a gathering was called on Concordia Prime. The station had been repaired and restored. The hall where General Chen had been shot now held a memorial marker on the exact spot where she had fallen. Representatives from every species in the galaxy came to this gathering. Not just the great powers, but the smaller species too. Races that had never had a voice in galactic affairs. Races that had been ignored or dismissed by the old treaty. Humanity sent 2 representatives. Admiral James Chen came in his military uniform, representing the strength that had won the war. And beside him, in a hover chair, because she was still recovering, came General Amara Chen. The hall fell silent when she entered. Here was the woman who had been shot, the woman who had almost died, the woman whose near death had started a war, and whose survival had helped end it. Amara looked older than she had 3 months ago. The wound had taken much from her, but her eyes were still sharp, still kind, still determined. She was helped to the speaking platform by her son. For a moment, she simply looked out at the vast gathering. All these species, all these beings, watching her. "I died on this spot," she said, her voice soft but clear. "For a few minutes, my heart stopped beating. I was gone." She touched the memorial marker beside her. "When I woke up, I learned what had happened. I learned about the war. I learned about the battles. I learned about the destruction." She paused. "And I learned about mercy." Her eyes moved across the crowd, stopping on faces from different species. "My son led a fleet that could have burned the Zarathian Empire to ashes. No one could have stopped him. No one would have blamed him. I was his mother, and they had tried to kill me." James stood behind her, his face unreadable. But he chose differently. He chose to fight only those who deserved to be fought. He chose to protect those who had done nothing wrong. He chose mercy, even when mercy was hard. Amara's voice grew stronger. "That choice is what makes us human. Not our ships, not our weapons, not our technology. Our choice. We can be terrible. We can be destroyers. The galaxy knows this. You have seen what we can do when we are angry." She let that sink in. "But we can also be builders, healers, friends. That is also who we are. And that is who we choose to be." She gestured to the assembly around her. "The Pax Galactica is finished. It was a treaty born from fear. Fear of us, fear of each other, fear of what might happen if the peace was broken. That fear kept us apart as much as it kept us together." She reached out, and her son took her hand, helping her stand a little straighter. "I propose something new, not a treaty of fear, but a covenant of equals. Every species, large or small, old or young, will have a voice. Every species will help build our shared future." She looked directly at the Zarathian delegation, new leaders who had risen after Velketh's fall. "Even those who have hurt us will be welcome, because holding on to old hate only creates new pain. I know this. I could hate your people for what your leader did to me, but what good would that do? It would only make me smaller, and it would not change the past." The Zarathian representatives bowed their heads in shame and gratitude. Amara continued. "This new covenant will have rules. No species will attack another without cause. No species will enslave or oppress another. Disputes will be settled through dialogue, and if dialogue fails, through fair arbitration. She smiled slightly. And if any species breaks these rules, if any species tries to conquer or destroy, they should know that humanity will still be here. We will still be ready. Her smile faded. We do not want to be the galaxy's police. We do not want to be feared. We want to be partners, equals, friends. But we will not allow what happened to me to happen to anyone else. That is our promise. That is our covenant. The assembly was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause began. It grew and spread until the entire hall was filled with the sound of approval from 1,000 different species. The Covenant of Equals was signed that day. Every major species added their mark. Every minor species was invited to join. For the first time in galactic history, there was a true union of all intelligent life. Years passed. The galaxy healed from the scars of the brief war. Trade flourished. Knowledge was shared. Problems that had seemed impossible were solved through cooperation. General Amara Chen recovered fully. She returned to her work as a diplomat, traveling from world to world, helping to strengthen the bonds between species. Her son James retired from the military and became an administrator, using his organizational skills to build rather than destroy. The hidden fleets of humanity were not destroyed. The secret weapons were not abandoned. Every generation continued to maintain them, just as generations before had done. Peace was precious, but humans never forgot that it could be broken. On the 10th anniversary of the Covenant, a celebration was held on Concordia Prime. It was smaller than the gathering where everything had started, more intimate. Delegates who had become friends met to remember what they had built together. General Chen, now 73 years old, but still strong, stood in the memorial garden that had been created where she was shot. The garden was filled with plants from every world in the galaxy, a living symbol of unity in diversity. Her son James stood beside her, gray appearing at his own temples now. Around them, beings of many species walked peacefully, talking and laughing together. A small group approached them hesitantly, a Zerathian family, parents and children, visiting Concordia Prime for the first time. The youngest child, a girl no more than 5 years old, held a flower in her small blue hands. She walked up to General Chen, looking nervous. Her parents watched anxiously from behind. "Are you the woman from the stories?" the child asked. Amara knelt down, ignoring the protest from her aging knees. "What stories?" "My grandmother tells me stories. She says you are the one who taught the galaxy how to be kind." Amara looked at the child's innocent face and felt tears forming in her eyes. "I tried," she said. "We all tried." The child held out the flower. "This is for you, to say thank you, and," she looked back at her parents for encouragement, "and to say sorry for what the bad man did." Amara took the flower gently. It was a small thing, purple and white, from the Zerathian homeworld. A gesture of apology from a child too young to have done anything wrong. "Thank you," Amara said. "It's beautiful." The child smiled brightly, then ran back to her parents. They bowed to General Chen with deep respect, before moving on to explore the garden. James helped his mother stand again. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. "This peace we've built?" Amara watched the Zerathian family walking away, the child holding her mother's hand, pointing excitedly at the different plants. "Maybe," she said, "maybe not. Peace is not something you build once and then forget. It requires work. Every day, every generation. The choice must be made again." She looked up at the stars, visible through the garden's transparent dome. "But that's the human way, isn't it? We keep trying. We keep building, we keep choosing to be better than we have to be. And if it breaks again?" She looked at her son, at the soldier who had chosen mercy when destruction was in his grasp. "We'll be ready," James finished. "We always are." Amara smiled and squeezed his hand. We always are. Around them, the galaxy continued to turn. Beings of every kind went about their lives, building and creating, arguing and reconciling. Not perfect, not without conflict, but moving forward together. And in the archives of every world, in the histories taught to every child, humanity's entry had been quietly updated. No longer primitive species protected status, as it had read 900 years ago. Now it read simply, humanity, approach with respect. Not with fear, not with suspicion, with respect. It was a small change, but it meant everything. General Amara Chen placed the purple flower in the soil of the memorial garden, adding one more piece of beauty to a place that had once been marked by violence. "Remember what we are," she said quietly, echoing her own words from so long ago. And now, finally, the galaxy understood what she had meant. They were human, capable of great destruction and great compassion, fierce warriors and gentle healers, builders of empires and keepers of peace. They were everything, and they chose, every day, who they wanted to be. That was their gift to the universe. That was their legacy. The covenant would endure, not because it was enforced by weapons or fear, but because it was maintained by choice, by the daily decision of countless beings to be better, to work together, to remember the lessons of the past. And if the day ever came when that choice was threatened again, humanity would still be there, watching, waiting, ready, but hoping, always hoping, that they would never be needed. That was the most human thing of all, hope.